These are the parts to the best $1,000 gaming PC that you can build right now. And don't just take my word for it. These experts have all said the same thing. But in this video, we're gonna go through it step by step in way more detail, showing you which parts you should pick or could pick, as well as how to put the PC together, set it up, and of course, how it performs in some of your favorite games. So let's get started. Starting with the motherboard, we've got the B850 Micro ATX motherboard from Gigabyte. Now this one comes in at around $159, and there are definitely some cheaper options. So if you can't find this exact motherboard and the prices don't work out, you could go get something else, but I really like this one because it's super easy to put everything together. Then you want to take the motherboard and set it on top of the box. And next we're going to install our CPU, which is the Ryzen 5 7600X. This thing's going to be perfect for the 1440p gaming that we're going to be putting this PC through. And it gives you plenty of room for some PC upgrades in the future. To install the CPU, you're going to take this lever, press it down and move it to the right, and gently lift up the cover that is over the CPU socket. Make sure you don't touch that because you don't want to bend any pins. Then we're going to take out our CPU. Then if you notice on our CPU, we do have this little golden arrow right here, which lines up with the arrow that's on this black plastic piece, which means we can gently set the CPU in the socket like you see here. Then we can close down the black plastic part and then push the lever down and the plastic piece will pop off and the CPU is installed. Now, sometimes for the CPU, you can find the 9600X around the same price in that 170-ish something dollar mark. Either one will be fine. If you want to save even more money, you can go with the 7500F, but you'll have to get it off Newegg to get the best price. Next, we can do the RAM, and I actually got this Crucial RAM, 32 gigs, 6000 megahertz, but it is a CL36, which some people will complain about, but it was on sale for only $85.
At the time of recording this video, RAM prices have kind of been jacked up because there's going to be a Prime Day in October. I expect all these prices to go back down, but you should be able to get some CL30 at a pretty decent price. Like this Viper kit here is CL30 6000 and it's only $95. I do think you'll have some under 90 if you're just patient and wait. If you don't want to wait, the CL36 will be fine. Like there's this PNY kit that's pretty awesome. It's only $78, which is actually cheaper than what I paid for the Crucial RAM in this video. So you have options here. Just look for CL30 6000. That's going to be the best bang for your buck, but if you go to the CL36, if it's 6000, you're going to be okay.
Now for the RAM, we're going to put it in slots 2 and 4, and what you want to make sure to do is to line up the slot that is on the RAM with the slot that is on the motherboard. In this particular motherboard, you only have to press back these two tabs, then make sure you line the RAM up and snap it into place. And repeat those same steps for the second RAM stick. Last but not least, we have the Crucial P3 Plus. Now this is not sponsored by Crucial at all, but at the time that I ordered these parts, this particular drive was on sale. You just need the cheapest 1 terabyte drive, that is Gen 4, so Silicon Power and Clev are also some really good options that are around that $55 to $57 mark, because that's what you want to shoot for. And the SSD is gonna go right here, and one reason I really like this motherboard is they make it super easy to install the SSD. Just remove this little plastic piece here. We're gonna go in at a 45-degree angle, slide in the SSD, and then press it down, and we can let it just clamp into place with the quick release, then put the cover back on and let it slide back into place. Now we can install the CPU cooler, which is the SE214XT. I really love this cooler because it's only like $15 to $18, depending on what you find it at on Amazon, and it will cool some pretty beefy CPUs. Now to install the CPU, we have to remove the screws here on the outside of the CPU. This is because we need to get to the holes that are underneath here to install the CPU cooler. Since we're doing AM5, we're gonna want these red standoffs and screws, and we're gonna put one standoff on each of the holes. Then we're gonna take the screws and put them in the outside parts of this bracket, and we're gonna make sure we screw it in so that it's facing this direction. Do the same thing for the other side, but just get it snug. Do not over tighten. Then take the thermal paste and just squirt it nice and big in a blob right there in the middle, because the CPU cooler will smooth it out. Just make sure you pull the sticker off first. Then you're gonna line up the screws here with the threads that are on both sides of the CPU cooler. Then alternate going back and forth between the two screws, giving a couple of turns on each side. Again, until they're snug, don't over tighten. Then to install the fan, make sure the cord is in the bottom right and take these little metal hooks and hook it into the top and the bottom of each side of the fan. Then take the cord and put it towards the top of the motherboard and you'll hook it into place as you see right here. Now we can put it inside the case. The case we're using is the Fantex XT-M3. It comes in at only $70 with 3 pre-installed fans. The first thing we gotta do is remove the top panel and remove the 2 screws where these arrows show you. Then you can pop off the front glass as well as the back panel. Just make sure you don't lose the screws. Another pro tip is to put all these back in the box so you don't break it or lose it. Then we want to lay the case down flat so it's easier to see everything and remove any bags that might be in the way. The next thing we want to do is make sure the holes that are in the motherboard like this line up with the standoffs that are in the case. Standoffs look like this in case you don't know. If all of those line up, since we already have an IO shield on this motherboard, we can go in at a side angle like you see here and gently slide it into place, making sure all the holes line up, as well as making sure the IO shield lines up in this hole that's on the side of the case. Then you're gonna take the bag of screws that comes with your case and find the screw that looks like this. These are your motherboard screws and you're going to put 1 screw in every hole that lines up with a standoff. Since we're doing a micro ATX build, we're gonna use 8 screws. Another pro tip is to not tighten them all the way down until you get them all into place. That way you can still wiggle the motherboard around just a little bit so the screws will go in easy. Then go back and get them all snug. Do not over tighten. After we get the motherboard installed, we're next gonna install the power supply, which is the Montech APX 650 watt power supply. It is white certified, which is going to make a lot of people mad, but it is C tier on the PSU tier list, so you guys can't get mad. Now, before we plug up the actual power supply itself, we wanna plug in all the other cables. Starting with these 2 cables that are on the CPU cooler, one of them looks like this and needs to be plugged in right here where it says CPU fan. Just make sure these notches line up correctly and it just slides into place. Then take your extra cord and just shove it towards the back through one of the top holes. Next is this 3-pin RGB header. It'll go right here where it says ARGB. Just make sure the holes line up correctly when you slide it on. And again, take the excess cable and push it to the back. Then at the back, we're gonna be looking for cables like this, and these are hidden behind a screw, which will make cable management much easier later on. You also wanna make sure you remove all of these twist ties because they do have metal in them and could short out your computer. For the cables, we have HD audio, which we wanna run underneath the far right side under the motherboard because that's where it's gonna be plugged up at. Then we have the USB 3.0 cable, which sometimes goes underneath depending on your motherboard, or it could go around the side. For our particular motherboard, we're gonna put it around the side towards the bottom. And this is a USB-C cable, and for most motherboards, it is also kind of on the side, so we will push the cable through there. Fantex makes their front panel connectors on their newer cases super easy, so it's just 1 cable, and it's gonna go under the left side of the motherboard. Then also for this case, we have 2 extra fan headers for the other fans in the case, which we're just going to put underneath the motherboard, and also the RGB header for the other fans will also go underneath the motherboard. Now we'll turn the case around, and with the HD audio, it's gonna go right here on the bottom left-hand side of the case, and you should be able to see F audio underneath there. It'll only go in one way, so just figure out which way that is and gently slide it onto the pins. Our USB 3.0 on this motherboard is actually down here at the bottom, which it's kind of hard to see. But this little notch is gonna line up with the notch on the cable, and it should just pop into place. It does require some force, just make sure you line that up first before you start pushing. The USB-C cable is super easy. It goes into the notch right here. Again, it only goes in one way. Then we have the front panel connector that looks like this, and it's gonna go right here on the motherboard. It's gonna go kind of more to the left side of this long white strip of pins. And again, it's only gonna go in one way, so just be kind of gentle when you push it in. Next, we'll take our extra fan cable that looks like this and plug it in where it says system fan. And again, make sure all the pins line up and slide it in. Then we have another RGB header that will go where it says ARGB. Make sure the holes line up with the pins and just slide it in. If you don't have enough fan plugins for the extra fans down here, you may have to go to the side and plug up the fan, which is what we're gonna have to do. Sometimes on the motherboards, they're also over here on this side. Just make sure they all get plugged up. Now we can install the PSU. And for this particular build, we only need 3 of the cables. First is the 24 pin, which we're gonna put around the left side of the case. Then the CPU cable, which kind of looks like it could be split in half right here in the middle, and it's gonna go in the upper right part of the case. Then we will need 1 PCIe cable, which looks like it could be split into 3 and 2, which mine is already kind of split, and it's gonna go up under the case. Now the way this case is slightly different than other cases, so when we mount the power supply, we're actually gonna be mounting it underneath like this right here with the fan facing us, which means we have to route the cables through this hole right here. Typically I recommend mounting the power supply last, but because this case is different, we're actually gonna mount the power supply first. Now to mount the power supply, we're gonna use screws that look like this, and they're gonna go into the 4 corners, sliding in the upward position here and mounting in the screws. Most power supplies either go right here or underneath, but I kind of like where this one's at on this case. Should make cable management easier. Now, once you get all 4 of those screws plugged in, you have this extra power cord that's right here that you're actually gonna plug into the power supply and just kind of tuck that cable in so that the top of the case can go back on later. Then we're gonna take this cable, which is our 24 pin, and run it through the left side of the motherboard. Then we'll take this one, which is the CPU cable, which is sometimes labeled CPU depending on your power supply, and run it around into the upper right of the motherboard. And the last cord we need is the PCIe cable, which looks like this, and we're gonna run it up under the left side of the motherboard and push it to the front. The 24 pin goes right here on the motherboard. Just make sure the clip is facing the outside and make sure it's nice and snug. Then you can try to push the excess cable back towards the back. The CPU cable gets plugged up into the upper left with the 2 hooks facing upward. Again, just getting it good and snug. I'm doing this a lot one-handed so that you can see it better, but you might wanna make sure that you use 2 hands to get it good and snug. Now we use this last cable for the GPU, so let's show you how to plug that up. Now the GPU we're using is the Radeon RX 9060 XT, the 16GB version. Now I actually got sent this card for free from Asus. It is the tough gaming version, but for this particular build, I actually don't recommend buying this one because it's kind of pricey. You need to go to Newegg or Amazon and look to get it for anywhere from $350 to $380 so that you can stay under that $1,000 budget. To install the GPU, the first thing we're gonna do is pop this plastic piece off, and we're gonna line up the PCIe with the top slot of the motherboard. And our goal is to see how many of these we need to remove. For this particular GPU, I need to remove the top 2. So I'm gonna take out these screws, but you wanna make sure that you keep up with them because you're gonna need the screws to screw in the graphics card here in a minute. You might also wanna save these in case you need them later. Now on this particular motherboard, we just have to line the GPU up and snap it into place because it has a quick release button. Then we can take the 2 screws that we just removed and screw them back in to secure the graphics card. Then we're gonna take the PCIe cable that we ran up under the case from earlier and put it into this 8-pin GPU slot right here. For this particular one, the clamp will be facing upward. Again, you might need 2 hands to really get the job done. You can push this excess cable underneath the GPU here, and now we're ready to see if it'll boot. To make sure to boot, plug up the power cord for the power supply, and make sure your power supply is flipped to the on position like so. Then make sure you plug in your HDMI or DisplayPort cable into the graphics card, not the motherboard, but into the graphics card. Then we can press the power button and pray it doesn't explode. This means everything is working fine. Now we can go flip the switch off since that everything is booting up just right and cable manage our PC. And that actually starts at the front of the PC. We want to make sure all the cables are pushed all the way to the back of the computer so that the front looks as good as possible. If you have an extra dangling GPU cable like this, a quick fix is to grab a zip tie and zip tie it down to the PCIe cable. That'll make it look much cleaner. But that was the easy part. The back of the case is where we have a lot of work. And zip ties are your friend. Typically what I like to do is to try to make 2 lanes. This power supply is different than most of the power supplies that we use, so our paths normally go down this side of the case, but in this particular build, we're gonna run some cables up towards the top. Starting with our CPU cables and these 2 extra fan cables. We're gonna place 1 zip tie right here, and our goal is to get all these cables up above the gap in the motherboard so that we can't see them. Now, it won't be perfect, but it will make it much cleaner right through here. Then any extra cable that we have right there, we will just tuck it back underneath into this little gap. Now, that's what makes cable management in this particular case very, very easy. We can do the same exact thing with these cords on the bottom. You can zip tie them if you want to, but they stay pretty good up underneath the motherboard here. So once we have this top run of cables situated, really all there's left to do is take any of the extra cables and tuck them all here into this opening, because this particular case comes with a nice cable cover to where everything looks really good. Now I can show you how to install Windows. Now that we have the computer built, we're gonna install Windows. So to do this, you're gonna need an 8GB flash drive and a computer that already has Windows on it. So you could borrow that from a friend, a family member, sometimes even like a public library will allow you to do this as well. So if you can work that out, you'll be good. There's also a website called PC Bros where you can order one if you really just don't want to try to do it for free. They're the ones that I probably trust the most. There are some on like eBay or Amazon, but they are super expensive. So we're gonna plug this into the computer and show you how to set it up. First, we want to pull up a web browser and go to Windows Installation Media. And we want to find the one that says download Windows 11. But in order for this to work, regardless of which computer you're running, you need to scroll down to where it says Windows 11 Disk Image ISO. And we're gonna select to download that. Then select the language of your choice and begin the download. I just save it to the downloads folder. After we have that downloaded, we're gonna go to a website called rufus.ie. And we wanna make sure that we download the standard version. Once it's downloaded, go ahead and run it, and then it'll open up the latest version of Rufus. Here we wanna make sure the correct USB is selected, because if you don't, it's gonna erase everything that's on it. That's the only one I have, so it's already selected. Then we wanna make sure that it's on the ISO. Then here we can go to the right and select, and we want to find where you downloaded the ISO, which for me is in my downloads folder. Then Rufus will pre-fill out everything, and if you want to change the name of it, you certainly can. I'm going to change mine to Windows 11 ISO. Then we can click start, and here's where the customization comes in. So for this particular video on YouTube, we don't really need to do anything special, but if you have a computer that is not able to run Windows 11, you can click to remove this feature requirement so that it will automatically install Windows 11 from any device. I also recommend removing an online Microsoft account requirement and creating a local account with the username user, so that saves you some steps when creating your PC. Then a warning will pop up that you're gonna lose everything on the flash drive, so just make sure you, again, selected the correct one. If you're just wanting to upgrade your existing computer to Windows 11, you can just go to your Windows ISO file and run setup. But since we're setting up a brand new PC, we're gonna take out the flash drive and go put it in the one we just built. Now that our flash drive is ready, we're gonna plug it into the back of our newly built computer. You're also gonna need your keyboard and mouse. Then you can turn on your computer and boot it up. If you get to a screen here that says new CPU installed, just press Y. Then it might take a few minutes, but it's gonna reboot through the cycle again, and you'll see a post. And then finally it should boot up so we can go through the installation option. And we want to install Windows 11. Now we do not have a product key for this particular computer, which we can buy from places like SCD Key, Keysfan, or something like that, or you can pay the full $100 and something for a non-OEM official key. Then it'll take a few minutes to get everything ready. I always select Windows 11 Pro, but the home version should be fine as well. Now here from a list of drives, we can see that disk 1 is our 8GB flash drive because it has the Windows 11 ISO. Obviously that's not gonna work. We wanna find the one that is unallocated space, which is our SSD that we just installed to the actual gaming PC itself. Then click next and then install. Now it's going to install Windows 11, but it's probably going to take a while. We'll be back when it's done. Once that's completed, we can go through the normal Windows installation process, just selecting the options that are best for you. And we're going to say we don't have any internet so that we can make sure that we get through everything else. Typically it would ask you for a Windows password or login. But since we created this with Rufus, we get to go straight to Windows and just wait for everything to set up. Now that we're into Windows, we can go and install the drivers. You are gonna need to be connected to the internet. Ethernet is gonna be your best option, at least until you can install the Wi-Fi drivers for your PC. Now, every motherboard is different. This particular motherboard does have the option for us to go ahead and download the Gigabyte Control Center, which will help us install the drivers a little bit faster. If your motherboard doesn't prompt you for this though, you can go to the the actual website and find your specific motherboard and download the drivers. But regardless of brand, they do have a driver software where you can install that a little bit easier. Once we're inside here, we do want to find all of the drivers that we want to install. Do not install any sort of internet security. So like I'm gonna uncheck Norton because that's just gonna get me something crazy. And then anything that says software, pretty much going to uninstall it unless you want the RGB tool, which I do want that. But down here where it says drivers, we do want to install all the drivers. The only software that I typically install is the RGB tool, but that's only all the lights in my PC are the same and they're connected to my motherboard. My graphics card's actually from ASUS, so I'm going to uncheck the RGB tool and only install the drivers. This could take a while, so we'll be back when it's done. So once all the motherboard drivers are installed, the next thing we want to do is install our graphics card drivers. So pull up a web browser, and since we're using the RX 9060 XT, we're gonna search for AMD Adrenalin. And it should be like one of the first things that pops up. We're gonna download the software and of course use the Windows drivers. Then when it's done downloading, we're gonna open it up and give it permission to run. And it's gonna go through figuring out exactly which driver is best for your system. So we have the 9060 XT, so we're gonna accept and express install. This could take up to 10 minutes, so don't freak out about that. Also, your screen is gonna go black a few times. Again, don't panic, just wait till it's all done. Once it's finished, it may or may not prompt you to restart your computer, so go ahead and do that. Now, once you've booted back up, there's still two things we need to do before we play games. Number one is go to the search bar and look for check for updates. More than likely, you are gonna have some updates that you need to install from Windows. Again, this might take a while, so just, let it all run and then we'll come back when it's over. Now, while all of this stuff is trying to install, another pro tip that I would give you is you can go to the search bar and search for your sleep settings and turn these on so that your screen will never turn off. That way all the updates will keep running and your computer doesn't go to sleep and they stall halfway through. Another thing you might run into, which I'm glad this happened so I can show you, sometimes you get install errors. That's just because you had so many updates. Sometimes some of this stuff just won't install. So don't freak out about it. Go ahead and restart your computer and see if they go away. Once it boots back up, you can go to updates, and if those are still there, just try to retry them and see if they'll install now. And most of mine just went away, but there was another update that needed to install, so we're gonna let that run. Now, once your updates are installed, there's only one more thing that you need to do, and that's to restart your computer. And while it's restarting, we're going to press the delete button on our motherboard until we get into what is called the BIOS. Now, we're not gonna change very many settings in here. Some people change a lot of them. All we're gonna go to do is find our XMP or Expo profile, and we're gonna enable it. And since we're using AMD, we're gonna do Expo number 1. Once that's selected down here at the bottom, then we can press F10 to save our changes. Side note, if you wanna change the RGB on your computer, I do like using the app Signal RGB. You can just search for Signal RGB and download it on your browser. You can create an account or just be a guest, which is what I like to do. And then you should be able to pick the color you want for your particular system, or pick from any of their weird lighting effects that they have. If for some reason your GPU light still doesn't work like mine, you may have to actually install the RGB software for ASUS to get them to all match, which sucks. But anyway, now we're ready to install games and show you how it performs. All right, so we got some games downloaded on this thing and we ran it through a series of tests and just a few popular games to give you an idea of how this thing will perform, because we already know it looks really, really good. We tested it in Borderlands 4 at medium settings. With no upscaling, you barely got 60 FPS with some drops into 40s, but if you use upscaling, it's super smooth with 80 or 90 FPS. Marvel Rivals medium settings, you got 80 to 90 FPS, but if you took off the ray tracing, the forced ray tracing lighting settings, you got closer to 120. And we tried Warzone balanced settings, no upscaling, anything like that. Warzone's super optimized, you got 180-ish FPS. And Fortnite on performance mode or DX12. DX12 was 250-ish FPS. Performance mode was pushing over 300. In fact, it was close to 400. So overall, I think this PC performs really well, but if you want to see it in some more benchmarks, I do have a dedicated video for the 9060 XT using the 7500F.